Vale, tan orgulloso. Suena muy...
Hola, vamos a empezar ahora con el único panel. Hola, vamos a empezar ahora con el único panel de la tarde. Después tenemos el taller de literatura de AIK2024 y la presentación de la exposición de fotoperiodismo. Y bueno, este panel va a ser en inglés, pero tenemos tres ponencias, una de ellas online. So I will change the language briefly. So, our first speaker is Natalia Mirón Florido, to my left, who has a bachelor's degree in English studies with a pathway in literature in English, a master's degree in comparative literature and literary studies from the University of the Basque Country. She is currently a PhD student in the program Comparative Literature and Literary Studies as well. Her research interests cover a wide range of topics: post-coloniality, West East cultural interactions, gender and queerness, with a preference for a fantasy context. At the moment, she's working on a thesis titled Through Colonized Eyes: How Japanese Popular Culture Occidentalized the Anglo-Saxon Archetype of the British Battler. And her talk today is called Blue Monkeys and Space Whales: An intersectional approach to Orientalism and speciesism in James Cameron's Avatar franchise. So whenever you want, you can start.
Hello. Okay. Okay, so thank you for your presentation. Thank you for having me here. This is a great atmosphere, and I'm very glad to be part of this. How do I pass the... No, it's okay. Okay, so as Anne has said, my presentation will approach the ways Orientalism and speciesism overlap in James Cameron's Avatar. So I think that first we need to see how they overlap outside, right? So we are going to make a theory, and then we are going to see how that theory applies to a product. Okay, so obviously I'm not the first person who saw that speciesism and Orientalism are somewhat linked. Donna Haraway in Primate Visions studied the field of primatology, and she pointed out that primatology was very concerned with finding difference, right? Because it was a taxonomic field, right? So it wants to find differences so that they can put the different species in different boxes. And she pointed out that this is very similar to the way Orientalism finds difference to make that box of the other, right? So one would be in the field of animal studies, the other one would be more like racial critical theory and those kinds of things. So she pointed out, she pointed out that in the same way that we kind of see primates as our biological ancestors because we have like a common ancestor, we tend to see a monkey, for instance, like a version of what we used to be as a species, right? So they are our ancestors in the sense of species, biologically speaking, or even genetically. The same happens with Orientalism, right? So Edward Thais, who wrote this book, says that we tend to see what we classify as Oriental nations as our civilizational ancestors, that is to say, they are instances of what our modern civilization, with a lot of inverted commas, used to be, well, in its primitive stages. And well, he points out that this has nothing to do with the fact that indeed we have things that we have inherited from civilizations that used to be placed in those territories, like I'm thinking, for instance, Mesopotamia. It has more to do with the fact that as Western people, we tend to see Oriental civilizations as unchanging, right? So they are our ancestors because they have not changed. Okay, I would argue that Simian Orientalism, what Donna Haraway called, and Said's Orientalism cannot be seen as different things, and I would like to explain to you why. So, Orientalism is based on as I said, on finding difference. But it's more than that, it's the creation of a hierarchy, and one of the tools to identify at which point of the hierarchy a race should be is how much they resemble animals, right? So, for instance, a black person from Eurocentric perspective would be seen as in the middle between a primate and, for instance, a white person, right? So we have the overlapping systems of oppression of racism and Eurocentrism, as well as despotism and anthropocentrism. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. So we cannot. I argue that we cannot see Orientalism without bearing in mind the speciesism, that it is inherent to the system. And you can see this a lot in the way that historically we have talked about other races. I'm thinking, for instance, of the field of phrenology that used to measure the size of the cranium, right? And it established a hierarchy between white people, black people, and Asian people by comparing them to chimpanzee skull, right? So yeah, this is my theory. And now I would like to put it into practice by looking at the movie Avatar. Okay, so for those of you who haven't watched the film, well, it is pretty well known, but I don't want to assume anything. So Avatar tells the story of a disabled man that travels, so it's science fiction, first of all, science fiction. In a distant future, he travels to a planet called Pandora, which is being colonized by mostly white American people. Wonder why? Well, he enters a program called the Avatar program, by which humans create an avatar, right? So a version of themselves that is made of the combined genes of the human body and the body of an alien native, right? So this person here, this would be a native of Pandora. They are called Navi. Yeah, so this man becomes has an avatar, and through this avatar, he's able to abandon his body mentally and start living with the natives through the avatar. The rest of the story is basically Pocahontas. It's literally, he falls in love with the princess of the native people, but then it turns out that the white humans are bad, surprise, surprise, because they want to take the resources from the land. And well, yeah, so basically Pocahontas, James Cameron said so himself, this is Pocahontas in the face. So these are not my words. Okay. Okay, so I don't want to extend too much because I think it is pretty clear that just like through this image, that the Navi, the native people, just like we do with Aboriginal people here, they are represented according to the values of Orientalism. So on the one hand, we have them that they are somewhat barbaric because they are less civilized, again, many inverted commas. We have that not only the fact that they don't have clothes or many clothes, but only the kind of technology they use, right? So they use bow and arrow and a knife. They don't even have swords, so they haven't reached the Middle Ages from a white perspective. They are also seen as somewhat eccentric because of their religion, right? So the Navi believe that everything is connected, that you should value nature. We will talk about animals later. And that is a bit shocking for the humans because they say it's just, I'm sorry for the language, but that's a direct quote, they are just damned trees. They are also referred as blue monkeys, so we have a reference to the link between Orientalism and mysticism. They are also represented as being very unruly and very irrational because they don't want to be colonized, right? So there's nothing as irrational as wanting to preserve your way of living from the colonizers. But on the other hand, we have this set of positive characteristics that we associate with Orientalism, like the fact that they have a very communal experience, right? So on the one hand, that seems to be good, but it also results in them being identified as a mass and not really having individual identities. So like, is it good? Is it bad? More bad than anything else. There's also a lot of remark on the aesthetic values that they represent. They have a lot of war paints and those kinds of things. And also the mysticism also associated with the religion because the religion is sort of holistic. And it's like, you know, your white donkey is probably a lot into holistic medicine, and so are the Navi. Okay, so much like some white anti-specific people, this movie falls into this stereotype that Oriental religions have an inherently more positive relation with animals. And you know, this can be true and this can also not be true. I put these quotes because Singer talks about Buddhism, and there are still, like, he talks about Buddhism in general, but there are like 13 sects of Buddhism, and I assure you, not all of them treat animals well. So we have this assumption that because someone is Oriental, again, every time I say Oriental, please imagine me doing the inverted commas. Just because they are Oriental, this means that they are going to have a better relationship with nature, they are going to be more compassionate to animals, and this is not true. I mean, that erases the individuality within the Oriental subjects. Okay, so looking at the religion, I wanted to focus on this because this informs the way the Navi relate to the world. So we see that the Navi have a sort of deity that is called Ewa. More than a deity, Ewa is described as a consciousness. So Pandora, the planet, is kind of a giant brain, and the synapses of the neurons are similar to the way that the roots of the trees are connected to each other, right? At one point in the movie, they point out like this is faster than the synapses between brain cells in the human brain. So as a result, the Navi believe that everything has like a sort of soul, right? So they are very much an animistic religion, but also kind of not. So they believe that while trees are part of Ewa because they form part of this neurological network, animals and the Navi themselves are outside that network. So the source book describes it as the relationship a child might have with the mother. So the mother is the origin, right? But the child also has its individual identity, right? So strictly speaking, whereas trees are part of AIWA, animals and Navi are not. So with animals and Navi being on the same terms, at least religiously, we may ask, so are Navi species? I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it word. Okay. So as I said, theoretically they are considered the same, right? So we have some bunch of animals. You will see many parallels with animals in our planet, and that is no coincidence, as you will see. So this is theoretically, but in practice, we see that they actually do treat animals very differently. I want to, how do I take this out? I don't know. Oh, okay. Okay. So one of the things is the fact that the Navi do not practice agriculture. So they are described as hunters and gatherers. However, in the movie, they are not shown gathering anything. They are mostly shown hunting and even overhunting. So these animals here that you can see, they are called wild beasts, and they are like buffaloes, right? Which poses an interesting parallel with the overhunting of buffaloes in the United States. So we are shown several killings of these animals in one scene. These are huge animals. I mean, gigantic, like bigger than elephants. And still they kill so many. They seem to do this on a regular basis because they have like a part of their group, of their social group, is devoted to just hunting. So they hunt every day. So I saw in this an instance of overhunting, because would they really need to eat that much? We are also shown the things that they eat, and they don't eat a lot. And they are not that many people. We are shown the whole village, and they are not that many. We also see that although they claim to hunt only for food, we see them wasting meat of animals that they see as pets because they have pets. So for instance, this is a viper wolf, and to anyone who has watched the movie, this is clearly a doggy. This is a dog. And they decide, well, to not carry the bodies of the dog. So they clearly make a difference. They make a difference with the hunted animals. So this animal here looks a bit like an antelope. It's an animal that is very similar to an animal that we would treat as prey. And in this case, they are treated much nicely. So, for instance, in the case of the dog, we see them staying with the dog after it has been killed, kind of like comforting them, saying a prayer so that the souls go back to AIWA. But in the case of these antelope, well, alien antelope, they say the prayer in a rush. We also see them placing themselves over the animal, even though the animal clearly cannot move. So we have instances of domination. And then there are these kinds of animals with which they can bond. Okay, so the Navi have a braid that has like at the end of the braid, there are like, I don't know how to describe them. They're like connections that go back to their brains, right? So they can join with other animals, and that means their minds are joined. And they clearly have a preference for the animals they bond with. This is Zeze. It is an ikran, which is like a bird and they use them like to fly and those kinds of things. And this moment is an extremely tragic moment in the movie, whereas the killing of the animals that are to hunt is not tragic at all. So we see that there's a clear pyramid here. There's a hierarchy that is informed both by aestheticism and by navicentrism. The Navi are at the top, the same way humans here are at the top. Below we have the bonding animals with which they can establish a mental connections, and then the pet-like animals with which they establish an emotional connections. And in the end, the animals that are there just to be hunted. And if we add humans and avatars that are really humans, but like with another body, we see a pyramid that is very similar to that we saw in our real world. So this has been criticized. So again, this is not me talking. I'm not the only one who saw this. A lot of people have criticized this movie for its hypocrisy of claiming to be ecological and wanting to save the planet, but excluding animals, and not only excluding them, but actively treating them aggressively. Okay, and well, sorry, I should have said the content warning before. I'm going to mention rape. I'm sorry, I should have said the content warning before. So there's a scene that is called the taming of the crab. And this is something that you are supposed to do to become a man, right? So this is a rite of passage. And this has been heavily criticized. I'm sorry if it's like blurry, because they were moving a lot and it was hard to take a screenshot. Then how do I go backwards? Can I go backwards? Okay. So an interesting thing I find here is that Neytiri is taking out her knife. So she was definitely gonna kill the Ikran if anything went wrong. So like she preferred to save the life of Jake rather than the Ikran, who had done nothing but be there, but be literally. Okay, so okay. So this scene has been pointed out as being extremely similar to the rape scene. So Jake is told that in order to know if he has chosen the right Ikran to tame, he has to check if the Ikran wants to kill him, which is a totally normal thing to do. And Ernst, in her blog, pointed out that this is very similar to sentences that I'm sure a lot of people have heard here, like no means yes, and if she fights you, she wants you, right? So very rapey everything. We see Jake overpowering the animal. We see him introducing his. I'm sorry if this is very uncomfortable. We see him introducing his braid inside the like a horn the Ikran had, which again it's like very similar to penetration. And we see him screaming, "You are mine!" And then to make the bond forever, what he does is he has to ride the Ikran. So again, some. I'm not gonna keep talking about this because this is very uncomfortable. Okay. No, why no movie? Why no movie? Okay. So another thing that has been criticized about this movie is the fact that, I'm sorry, I'm talking for so long, is the fact that they have used aestheticism to hide their racism. They seem to think that because they are aliens, they are not humans, but the Navi are essentially humans. So yeah, it's a weaponization of a real problem, aestheticism, and trying to use it to hide the fact that they are being maybe a bit racist. I'm gonna power through the rest. Another thing that has been criticized is this normalization of violence, especially because they use them as ritual rites of passage, right? In this way, they are kind of appropriating the idea that because native people do that to animals and they don't have an industrial complex, so maybe what we are doing is not that weird, right? So they do it, and it's natural, so why isn't ours natural? Okay, and in the end, what is more criticized is that Avatar includes a bunch of people that live in the borders of society, and instead of trying to put them in the center, they let the white man at the center because he is very comfortable there. And then the second movie, again, I'm gonna power through this, was in many ways a response to this. We have James Cameron choosing to show marine life because, as we know, marine life is one of the most ignored. Marine animals are very ignored when it comes to the speciesism, and they suffer a lot, and it's very normalized. Can think about massive fishing, for instance. We see very similar parallels, with the exception that when they kill the fish, there's no prayer. The fish deserves no prayer. His soul, I don't know, fish don't have a soul, I guess, in the Avatar universe. I really didn't understand this at the beginning. This is like the first scene in the movie. And again, it is extremely tragic when the animal they can bond with dies, but when animals that are hunted die, it's like, meh, it's for good. Okay, the case of the tulkuns. So tulkuns are space mammals. They are described as being intellectually and culturally equal to the Na'vi. They have names, philosophy, they have poetry, music, mathematics, and they are pacifists. So there's no option, right? So if you're a tulkun, you have to be a pacifist. It is enforced socially. But thankfully, they can be pacifists because they have a physical structure that prevents them from having to retaliate when they are attacked. Right? James Cameron has thought about everything. Okay, so from the point of view of the place they occupy in the pyramid, it seems that Na'vi and Tulkuns are at the same level, right? We are told they are equal to the Na'vi. They have many similar traditions. And in the source book, they say the Tulkun are not creatures. So they are specifically differentiated from other animals, not just like pet-like animals or hunted animals or bonding animals, because they can bond with the Na'vi as well. They are not creatures, they are not animals. They are like Na'vi, but whale. And from the point of view of this pacifist ideology that seems to place them on a moral scale over Na'vis, avatars, and humans who do exercise violence, well, this is very fine and dandy when you think about it like in a vacuum, but then you go to the movie itself and you realize that they are negating them any agency. They cannot defend themselves. And this is precisely one of the most tragic moments in the movie, right? So in the first movie, it was the destruction of the tree they all lived in. Here is the hunting of a tulkun, a whale. This scene is exactly the same as the way people hunt whales these days. When a new apex predator appears, someone that is stronger than the tulkun in the end can only die. They cannot retaliate. They cannot defend themselves. It is the myth of the willing victim that Carol Adams speaks of. The active and willing agents in the rape of their lives. This was a very sad scene. I'm kind of crying a bit now. So what happens to the tulkuns that decide that maybe they want, like, maybe it's a bit controversial, but I want to leave? Well, first there's victim blaming. They blame, this is a particular tulkun that is called Pajakan, and he's blamed for trying to resist the hunting by humans.
Not only that, but then he's expelled from his group, and the toucans are described as being extremely social animals. Well, animals, not creatures, apparently, according to the source book. So, from the Navi point of view, we have that the toucans are at the same level as the Navi, right? They are equal. We value them as one of our own. They call them their sisters and brothers. But in reality, toucans are even lower than the hunted animals, because the hunted animals at the very least can defend themselves, but the toucans can't. Like, the alternative is either I survive, I defend myself and survive, or I get myself killed. I have no choice. Okay, so conclusions, because I'm super late. So they wanted to make the thing, and well, it's my left, I think it's your right, I'm not sure. They wanted to make the circle. They wanted all creatures or living beings being at the same level, and Ewa being this consciousness that united all of them. But in the end, they managed to make another pyramid. They managed to make another pyramid that is exactly the same pyramid that we have here on Earth. So for a movie that claimed to be so pro-nature and pro-animals and anti-colonial, this is a pretty big disappointment. So what does this show? Well, it shows that the people who created this have bias. They have the one hand Orientalist bias. This is why they need to create an Oriental society to show like a holistic world. This is why they misrepresent the relationships that people in animistic religions have with animals. They use specifically to hide this Orientalism, which I think is really horrible. And they have, here it says interhuman, but I wanted to say interspecies. So they have certain stereotypes regarding interspecies relationships, which are not true to reality. And then there's the speciesist bias. We have that animals have no intrinsic value, and they are only valued to the extent that they are similar to the Navi, or they can be used in some way by the Navi. We have the naturalization of violence and the denial of agency, which in the end transforms the animals into willing victims of their own murder, and the vilification of resistance. So, and joining both of these biases, we have a hierarchization of living beings that places the white human animals over non-whites and the non-whites over non-human animals. So these are the works I cited. Thank you, and now I'm gonna leave. I don't have to leave. Okay.
No, you can stay here. Thank you so much for your presentation. And you don't have to switch that mic. I'm so amazed. Don't worry. Oh no. Thank you so much for your presentation about the different hierarchical power structures that we have in different systems of oppression. Now we are going to continue with the next presentation. All right, let me put this. Oh, well, you can put it yourself.
Oh, right.
So our next speaker is Sofia Duarte. She is concluding a PhD studies in the doctoral program in language, literature, and culture, and its applications at the University of Valencia in Spain. Her research revolves around the interdisciplinary field of animal studies, a critical framework that in her PhD thesis she is applying for the interpretation of Margaret Atwood's works and the presence of non-human animals in them. Additionally, she worked on the portrayal of non-human animals in the X-Men comics in her master's thesis. She is part of the research group named Animals in Literary and Visual Cultures from Equilibrium. So whenever you want, Sophia, you can begin.
Right, well, thank you, the organizers, for allowing me to present my paper here. Can you hear me properly, or just tell me, okay? No. So as you can see today, I'm gonna be talking about Gardens of the Galaxy Volume 3. And what I want to show is, or I want to discuss, is the ethics of animal experimentation in relation to this film, and how this type of film, these type of franchises can help us produce popular culture that aims to entertain, but also to question the ethical standpoints of those viewers that go and see the film. So I'm gonna very briefly go over the history of animal experimentation, literally like 1 minute of it. So we have that records show that non-human animals have been used for experimentation throughout centuries. We have possibly one of the biggest figure that everybody knows about is Descartes and his perception of non-human animals as being mere machines, automatas. Then we have a bit later on the anti-vivisection movement led by women primarily in the 19th century, particularly in the States and in Britain, and how this started to open up the conversation and try to question if this was correct or not. And possibly within the recent years, one of the key works is William Russell's and Rexford's The Principles of Humane Experimental Technique, where what they do is they try to propose a more humane approach towards animal experimentation, which includes the 3 R's of experimentation that we have talked about around the day today, which are replacement, reduction, and refinement. However, the problem is that there's still a big part of the population, human population, that believes that non-human animals are insignificant compared to the benefits that we can obtain from them, as Kianya now explained. And there's this there's a questioning of the moral status that non-human animals have. But as we have seen here, and I think we all agree on, there are others who believe that non-human animals are equal to humans and that they should be treated with the same respect. And this includes not forcing them into, and I quote, any service or kill them or use them for the interest of us. And also it must be kept in mind that, quote, animal subjects are incapable of providing informed consent of involvement in research studies. We have non-human animals, as we talked about today in the morning, they suffer when they're used for experimentation, they experience fear, pain, depression, anxiety, and even post-traumatic stress disorder. So if we take into account all of this, one can only question why there's more than 50 million animals used in experiments each year in the United States and 8 million in Europe. So you have here some of the statistics, but the ones from the States do not include mice, rats, crabs, fish, frogs, octopuses, turtles, and birds. They're not covered in those statistics. So there's a big number of species that are not included there. And the ones that we do have here, also we take into account the baboons, cats, cows, dogs, ferrets, guinea pigs, hamsters, horses, monkey, owls, pig, rabbits, and sheep. So we have a wide array of non-human animals that we exploit, but that most often than not we choose to ignore and not take into consideration. What is more, these non-human animals, once not only are they experimented on, but they have no afterlife. I believe that now in the United States, there are fights for in some states for these non-human animals to be able to be adopted or taken into sanctuaries, but this is only a few states, and knowing how the United States is, I doubt that will work very well. And even then, they are animals that will suffer throughout their whole life due to what they have experienced. They will have traumatic trauma and other illnesses. And well, within recent years, we have like 2 big standpoints, which are animal welfare and animal rights, are the possibly most important ethical approaches towards this. So we have from on the one side Singer, who he defends more of the principle of equal consideration of the interests of animals, and that the criterion of sentience should be what guides us, and who is deserving or worthy of having preferences and who isn't. But we also have those, for example, Tom Regan or Gary Crenshaw are against this and who believe that all non-human animals have the right to not be treated as means to an end. And Crenshaw, we have this quote here that you can see. So he questions that, and he opposes to the use of non-human animals, whether for food, experimentation, or entertainment. And he asks, why do we deem it acceptable to eat animals, hunt them, confine them, and display them in circuses and zoos, use them in experiments or rodeos, or otherwise treat them in ways in which we would never think it appropriate to treat any human, irrespective of how humane we were being. So I would argue that popular culture can open up this discussion to those who maybe are not so conscious about this, that maybe you go see a film that you have no idea about the whole animal movement, but it can be a way of starting the discussion. So if we look into popular culture and animal welfare, we have that debates regarding this have been present practically since the beginning. We have a canonical example of Black Beauty, a book written in 1877, but we also have, if we take into consideration films, all the ones that we have here, they're the most important ones. So we have in these examples how non-human animals are employed in wars, entertainment, food consumption, or experimentation, and how they are questioned. Malamud argues, and I quote, that animals in visual culture are often disguised in some way, costume or mask or disorder or disfigure. And this prevents us from seeing the authentic animal beneath the cultural livery. Animals are disguised perhaps because the authentic animal would be too depressing or too scary or too boring for the viewer to observe. So all these films, sure, they talk about the problem, but always from a very Disney-fied version, like you said today in the morning. Here's the thing, like if we look at the list that I have here, most of them tend to be aimed for kids. So again, it's very, very light, the debate that they open. However, we have a few examples in recent years, for example, the Rise of the Planet of the Apes or Auction, which are more aimed towards a wider audience. And this can help open up the debate and explore the theme in a more graphic, I would say, way, and discuss it in a different style. For example, in Finding Nemo, we're not gonna talk about it the same way as with an adult audience. And this is where Guardians of the Galaxy comes. I'm gonna talk about it like you haven't seen it, so I don't know if all of you are have you seen it, but if not, I'm gonna go over it again. So this is part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's directed by James Gunn. We have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 and 2 from 2014 and 2017. And you can see that basically it's a film of a group of outcast heroes who try to save the different galaxies of the current universe. And the thing is that they're all outcasts, and we have these are the members. So you have Star-Lord, Mantis, Nebula, Drax, Groot, and the one I'm going to be talking about, Rocket, which is the raccoon that we have here, who is voiced by Bradley Cooper. From the picture, you can already tell that he's capable of handling guns, totally normal for a raccoon, obviously. We also have him posing as a bipedal animal on his 2 feet, which is also strange considering that raccoons mostly walk on 4. And an ongoing joke throughout the 3 films is that he's called a raccoon, but he denies this. He says that he is not, that he gets angry with this, and all the characters are not really aware of what he is. And what started out seemingly like a joke certainly becomes a disturbing statement because we realize that he does not know who he is really. That's what he denies it. So he denies his own identity. So this 3rd volume, which is the one I'm going to talk about today, focuses on Rocket's origin story and his transformation from a common raccoon to one that has been bioengineered to please the needs of a superior godlike being known as the High Evolutionary, which is basically the evil one in the film, okay? So we discovered that he's part of what is known as Batch 89, which I will show you in the next picture, this next slide. a group of non-human animals that were experimented on by this high evolutionary, who seeks to create the perfect planet with the perfect species, the perfect beings. Just like in real life with a normal raccoon, he is taken from his home as a kid. And during his forest moments of night, he is experimented on. And the third film opens up with this harrowing scene. It's a way of displaying directly what non-human animals were experimented on lived through and how they only know about being caged throughout their whole life. Moreover, we have one of the important instances, and I'm gonna come back to this again later on, is that he's referred to as P13. So he's just a number, nothing more, quite high evolutionary. So we have that this motion picture shows a candid description of the cruelty that non-human animals endure when they're employed in vivisection, and he seems to criticize the anthropocentrism in this, as we're gonna see, because it's not only rocket that's being experimented on. So here we have batch 89. So you can see that all of these are non-human animals that are taking place, that have been used to take place as a trial. And they are also placed alongside the cages of rockets. So we have Lila, she's an otter that we see on the top. We have Flower, the rabbit, here at the bottom. And we also have Teeps, which is the walrus, that we have up there. And you can see from the images that they're almost more machine than animals. They're described as being, and I quote, the result of illegal genetic and cybernetics experiments on a lower life form, and that's the important lower life form, and classified as half-orc. In theory, these experiments that they have to endure are used to enhance their intellect, their strength, their durability, their agility, and the senses of the regular counterparts of the non-human animal. So each animal will have a sense that is more developed, and with this, it will be even better. And throughout the shared trauma and the time they spend together, very brief, but the time they do spend together, is they dream about being free of seeing the sky. And I'm sorry for the spoilers, but they don't achieve it. It's not gonna what happened. So, according to Spiegel, and I quote, the term vivisection means life dissection, but it has come to be used to define any experiment performed on a living creature, human or non-human. This includes burning, freezing, non-therapeutic operations, disease studies, which involve inducing disease in a healthy individual, psychological experiments, drug testing, and virtually any other procedure which involves tinkering with someone's life in a non-therapeutic manner. So this is from real world, and we have here shown it in a fictional world where it seems to be a scandal. The pain that these non-human animals endure is portrayed throughout the film, especially when we see a young rocket coming back to his cage. First we see him being strapped on a restraining device, which is very similar to ones that they use on apes to experiment on. And then we deduce, because the scene cuts there, that he's had his scalp open, and we see a little bit of blood dripping. So we do not actually see the main moments of the procedure, but we have the fear that he feels before and the pain that he feels after. And I think this is one of the important things that I want to highlight about the film, is that Gunn could have profited from showing the cruelty and all, and very explicitly, but he avoids what Donovan coins as aestheticizing animal cruelty. Instead, he seems to place the focus on the pain, on the suffering of the non-human animal, but how he feels it, not the moment of itself. And so we also see that throughout the film, the focus is mostly on how they feel, how Rocket and his other companions, their sentiency. So instead of focusing on the humans and the evil ones, we have to focus on the non-human animals. So the aim of the test that the high evolutionary is carrying out is, and I quote, to take an imperfect clump of biological matter and transform it into something perfect in order to live in a new planet known as the counter-Earth. So the experiments that are carried out are simply a procedure to be used, and I quote again, on creatures that truly matter. And once they are no longer of use, they will be thrown away. So although we're talking about a fictional movie, it's exactly the same thing that we see with non-human animals in real life. They're experimented on so that we can, whatever benefits we obtain can be used on humans. If there is any profit for non-human animals, great, but that's not usually the objective. The objective is to improve humans' life. Again, we see that the high evolutionary, I have a picture of him in the next picture. He is practically godlike, but you see him and he looks very human. So again, you see here the coincidence. I'll leave it up to you to think about it. And so we also see that the superiority of the human in when Rocket asked if he can go to this new planet, and the high evolutionary replies that if he thinks that he has some worth in and of yourself without him. So again, his life depends on the human. Again, with the animals that we experiment on, we have the same problem. It's their lives depends on the humans, not on themselves. And another thing that I want to highlight is that the high evolutionary is quite hidden throughout the whole film. They have very difficult time finding it, just like laboratories and other facilities, which are usually not explicitly seen. I don't think most of us have actually been to one, come across to one in our daily life, unless we have willingly gone to it. So another thing that we see, another instance, that we see in the film is that of Laika. So in the film we have Cosmo, which is the doggy that we have up here, and she's a direct association with Laika, and she has not been experimented on by the high evolutionary, but by humans, actual humans like us. And she states that the humans sent her into space and they fully knew that she would never return and die in a powdered bubble of death. But since it was a scientific experiment, then it seemed to be ethically justifiable. And PETA explains that in Laika, the dog, I believe most of you are familiar with her story, but her training included being, and I quote, being spun in a centrifuge, confined to pressure chambers, locked inside progressively in smaller cages, and during the launch, her pulse shot up 3 times to its normal rate, and she was so terrified that it remained elevated for an extended time. Temperature inside the tiny spacecraft quickly soared, and within hours, she cooked to death, literally cooked to death, all alone and in severe pain. So we have here Cosmos is a character who has been in Marvel's universe for a long time. But James Gunn made sure to have her here talking, and one of the instances that she does talk is to make sure to mention this instance. So I want to quote Malloy here that she argues that our own humanity is perpetually structured through our relationships with other human animals, and I believe that Laika or Cosmo is a perfect example of how our lack of empathy towards non-human animals that are experimented on reveal exactly how we feel, so what kind of humans we are. So another instance that I want to talk about is the fact that James Gunn seems to highlight the fact that they're not simply numbers, but they're living beings, individuals. So one of the important aspects is that we have a raccoon being the protagonist. So I know raccoons, at least for me, they're very adorable. But if we take into account the American and Canadian context, they're liminal animals because they're not considered companion animals in theory and seen mostly as part of the American wildlife, but they also have become accustomed to being next to humans and even rely on them to feed. and or even obtain shelter. So this has caused them to be seen as a vermin by some, and Daniel Justice argues that when these non-human animals are categorized as vermin, their behavior sets them outside the norms and humans deem appropriate. When animals intrude on our projected boundaries of body and home, impinge upon our livelihoods and industries, or violate their sense of natural order, they enter the category of vermin and are thereby sentenced to death for presumed crimes against human interests. So the empathy that we feel towards Rocket throughout the film, with maybe a dog or a cat, would have been easily achieved, but with a raccoon, that means that there's an extra barrier that is set upon. And especially being a vermin, considered a vermin, this makes it even more easy to justify the ethical implications, the ability to experiment on them. So we see that Gunn seems to argue that even those who can be considered vermin are also worthy of a moral status and protection. This notion seems to be further explained with the idea that they are able to talk. And one of the first words, actually the first word that we hear Rocket saying is simply hurts. So we have that Gunn not only so he chooses the word hurts, which implies that Rocket is capable of feeling, he is capable of suffering, to be his first words. He could have chosen anything, but we have something that relies that demonstrates their sentencing. And when this takes us back to the first film, where Rocket at some point in the film states that he didn't ask to get made, it didn't ask to be torn apart and put together over and over and turned into some little monster. So everything now makes sense in this third film of why he has seen himself that way throughout the other films and the previous ones. Another important aspect of being able to talk is the ability to choose their name. So we have Lila, she states that she has been thinking that AIK2024 is not really a name. So I would like my name to be, and there's the scene that each one of them proceeds to choose their own name. So it's each one of them who decides it. And I think this kind of resembles the biblical moment of Adam deciding and imposing the names on non-human animals. But here we have them being the ones that decided. And I think it kind of symbolizes also the Ursula Le Guin's story of she unnames them. So they decide to reject their number and have their own name, their own individuality, and decide who they want to be. So they're no longer an ID number, but sentient beings. And well, we also have that there are other non-human animals, as the ones that we see here at the top, which are considered humanimals. And then we also have, here you can see the high evolutionary in the second image, who also suffer become part of the experiments that the high evolutionary takes over throughout the film. And so we have to remember what the Mello says, that these animals never live in a home, they also never get a name, they are objects, not subjects, they have no history, no biography, no intentions, and no emotions. They live in a space where they are crowded with others, reducing their individuality, they're handily, rarely, when necessary, reducing an emotional connection. If necessary, they're giving numbers that are used to refer to them, but not address them. They do not feel the pain, so they are not anesthetized or killed with humane methods, and they have no agency, no ability to control their own lives, and ultimately, they're simply products. So we have this, we have that Gunn showed this throughout the story of Rocket. With this, I'm almost concluding. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is the kinship and otherness that we find throughout the film. So it's in towards the end of the film, we have that the spaceship where the high evolutionary is, it's about to explode, and that includes all the living beings that are inside this spaceship are going to die. So the Guardians of the Galaxy appear and decide to save them. But who are they going to save? So in first instance, okay, the ones that they save first is the ones that we have in the second image, which, well, kind of surprise, they're very human. They're not, technically, they're not humans, but physically, yes, they look like one. And, we have here at the end of the film that it's Rocket, the one that says, finds that there's a room full of other raccoons and other non-human animals that were experimented on or were about to. And he argues with the other guardians of the galaxy that they need to be saved too, that they deserve, if he's a guardian of the galaxy, he's a member, the other ones deserve to have the same future, they have to be able to decide what they want. And this shows that there's certain instances of speciesism, even within the Guardians, who see Rocket as a being that is worthy of a moral status, but others who are exactly like him do not, or other non-human animals. And this happens also with other several creatures, non-human animals. They're not exactly, they're still in the galaxy here. I'm still trying to find the adequate word for them. But we have the animals that we see at the top, which are saved by Mantis, which is one of the aliens that we have in the first, and she's a woman, and she has also been othered. So we see that she's one of the only ones that actually finds kinship with them. It seems that since she has been othered, she understands their pain, and that's why she decides to save them. The same thing happens with Fleur, which is the second one we have in the second image, who is also saved thanks to, but again, a human, or superhuman, but what I mean is the human figure. And then we also have the Lamshank, which is the one we have here at the bottom. We only see him very briefly, but I wanted to include these three images because we see that not all of them are the typical cute, adorable, non-human animal that we have to save, but they're species that are completely different that more likely than not, people will not emphasize with. But here we have gone saying that they all deserve to be saved. So we have that, and I quote your Tiffin, that humans are presented as individual worthy of moral concern. But non-human others, most of the time, are presented as a collectivity or as a species to be preserved or eradicated at human will. So although the high evolutionary is defeated, it's still up to the guardians of the galaxy, mostly made up by humans, who are the ones that decide that they deserve to live. So we see here there's some contradictions between one instance and the other of the film. And okay, here I'm going to conclude. So basically what I wanted to show very briefly is that popular culture can become a means through which non-human animals are represented and their needs can be discussed. And not only this can be done through documentaries, which might not reach all audiences, but also through popular culture, especially taking into consideration that this is one of the biggest franchises that's seen throughout the whole world. So even if you're not a fan, you might have heard of it. So this means reaching a wider audience and opening the discussions to people that might have never even thought about it, about this problem that we live with. It has been greatly, the film has been greatly praised by PETA and the animal movement for its message against animal experimentation, the way that it deals with it. And of course, the film has its flaws and it could be portray the message a bit better, but at least it shows that we can overcome more anthropocentrism, like speciesism, and form a kinship with other species. And I wanted to end with this quote by Walker, which states that, and I quote, "We are guilty, but that is only a first response, and normal. What we do with our heightened consciousness is the question." So after finishing watching this film, if we at least get one person to start questioning the ethical status of non-human animals, at least it's a good way to start the discussion and maybe change one person's mind, at least one. So that is all. Do you have my website? Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sophia, for your very informative and interesting presentation on a franchise that I have never watched yet. I do intend to watch it. Now I'm going to go a little bit quickly. Because our last presentation has been recorded, since Marta won't be joining us here. She is online to answer the questions later on. Okay, let me see. So, our last presentation is by Marta Michele Valvegio, who holds a BA in English Philology, a postgraduate degree in Literary Studies and Digital Literature, and is a PhD and holds a PhD in Comparative Literature as well. Presently, she is working as a postdoctoral researcher at the Center of Literatures and Cultures in English of the University of Lleida. Her research focuses on the analysis of cultural discourses, mainly gender, aging, and ecology, in different artistic manifestations such as literature, art, and especially audiovisual fiction. The most recent research papers revolve around representations of animals in Gothic fiction, as in the case of the symbology of alien imagery in the short fiction of British author Daphne du Maurier. So let's see if the video works. Let me see.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation. The title of my paper is Dynamics of Agency and Exploitation, Human Animal Bones, and the Role of the Gaze in Georgian Fields in a Fictional Film Narrative. Since the origins of cinema, animals have acquired a pervasive presence in the film industry, and from scenes in films which saw the foundations of cinema featured animals ranging from lions and leopards to ducks and parrots. In addition to in the film industry, animals contributed significantly to the development of cinematographic techniques, which would pave the way for the advent of cinema as we know it today. The Mia brothers were responsible for the first public screening in 1895, workers living from a factory in Lyon, in which even intentionally horse-drawn carriages and street dogs were already exhibited in film. Leo Brian became the pattern landscape of the Hollywood film studio Metro Mayor when he was chosen in 1916, with publicist Howard Hicks. Although, in addition to Leo, 5 other Lions introduced films from this production company through the years. In particular, though, of special relevance for Europe's film Nero is the principle when they considered a cinematographic sequence dating back to the 19th century. The years after was debating the world kings of horses gathered, and being supported transit from fantasy last or moves, all 4 of the horses hooves came off the ground when they ran. In history, Roland Stanford believed that emerging technology would help settle the controversy, and he approached the photographer Edward Muybridge, who showed pictures in 1878. Not an environment had developed with regard to the course of the series of Canon cards became the first example of film photography, and a method to photographically record different cases of locomotion with scientific study which had been hailed and the earliest display of cinema. In particular, case 626 published in Woodbridge book Animal Locomotion, notes of photographic investigation of consecutive phases of animal movements, lies at the core of Peele's film, since the film's protagonists, the Sigurd Fortis Jr. and Emerald Haywood, work as horse trainers for film productions in California and are descendants of the unknown African American jockey in Woodbridge's pictures. This film presents two juxtaposed stories which will parallel structurally and convey the dynamics of agency and exploitation relating in show business on the basis of human and human bond. On the one hand, Ricky, who manages the Western theme park for Jupiter's Cave, explores his observatic experience as a town center of the sitcom featuring a chimpanzee named Gordy. During filming of an episode, Gordy reacted violently to the sound of popping balloons and attacked his goldsmith, leaving only Ricky unharmed. On the other hand, the Haywood siblings who tell their horses to reach his theme park, and with his unknown creature hovering over their range, which is a hero decided to set up surveillance cameras to film evidence of the existence of the creature to television reality shows. This film thus raises a critical voice about both animal and human exploitation and how abuse operates psychically and how there are identities between those who exploit and those who are exploited. These two parallel stories also display two poles from which animals have been traditionally perceived. The story regarding Gordy and Ricky brings to mind the anthropocentric notion that animals have often been a projection of human subjectivity, as Robert Ingle Levi-Strauss' statement that animals are good to think with. Chimpanzees in particular have traditionally been associated with human beings, establishing an ancestral link between humans and primates as doubles along the great chain of being. The film frame in which Gordy approaches Ricky extending his hand for a fist bump becomes particularly evocative of Michelangelo's Werner Gropius's iconic fresco, The Creation of Adam, and acquires significant evolutionary connotations. Conversely, in a film, The Creature, that hovers over the Haywood's ranch is literally eliminated insofar as it is categorized as unidentified anomalous phenomena, unless it is reported its animal condition and mistaken for an extraterrestrial object. Given the portrayal of the creature as eminently authorized, theorists like Steve Baker refer to the way animals have been presented in cultural manifestations as archetypal cultural authors, emphasizing the dividing line between human and non-human animals. Alternating between these two poles and their constant subversion, this presentation will follow a tripartite structure addressing the dynamics of agency and exploitation, the different approaches to the human-animal bond, and the pervasive role of the gaze in a profoundly metatextual narrative as Peele's film is, which constantly draws attention to notions related to the film industry and the culture of spectacle. Peele's film explicitly focuses on the psychological dynamics of agency and exploitation involving animals and humans since the origins of show business. While giving safety instructions prior to the shooting of the scene, Animal observes wittingly that, and I'm quoting from the film, since the moment pictures the moon, we had skin in the game. When Nick is ironic but also sharply critical remark, Animal draws attention to the devious dynamics, particularly since in the course of their talk, the Haywood siblings and their force remain exposed to the scrutiny and evaluation of all white members of the film crew. Carol Dickley claims that as a result of the critical theory from the Frankfurt School, animal studies underline the intersections existing among all forms of oppression, thus arguing that the pursuit of animal liberation and of human liberation are one and the same. Informed by Arthur Schopenhauer's theories on the community with animals, influential thinkers of the Frankfurt School like Max Horkheimer, Theodore Adorno, and Halbert Marcus already noticed the connection between the exploitation of animals and humans. More recently, Susan Kapler similarly claims that animal abuse interconnects all other forms of oppression, contending that we need to look at the common factors of power that not only connect these different instances of exploitation, but which through their intersection point to an accumulation of power in the hands of those whose interests are being served by all forms of oppression. From its origins, film industry has reflected as well as had its share in the exploitation of animals and humans. In fact, as Jose Alan explains, in film, humans and animals share a sort of relevant fictional space through which they interact and influence each other, all the time regarded by a human audience, in a metaphorical process of objectification and commodification. In particular, Peele's film now revisits the exploitation of horses during the context of the American West and how it found correlation in the instrumentalization of horse actors in complex Western films at the origin of cinema. A case in point, Tony the Horse, or Tony the Horse, appeared in over 45 films, along with Western star Tom Mix, and the horse trigger who starred with Western actor Will Rogers in 15 films, winning the award at Pepsi, the equivalent of the Academy Award for Animal Actors for its performance in the film Son of Paleface in 1952. In addition to bringing to the fore the exploitation of horses in early Western moving pictures, Nope also seeks to vindicate the figure of the African-American cowboy insofar as its director, Jordan Peele, was influenced by the 1972 Western film Buck and the Preacher, starring Sidney Poitier, who also directed the film. In Peele's words, it is the first film that they know of that had black cowboys represented in it. The myth that cowboys were just black guys running around isn't true, but we can know that because of Hollywood and its romanticized view of a very brutalized era. This process of individualization in Western film would also be extended to Asian American and Hispanic performers, as well as women actors. The exploitation of animals and humans is not a circumscribed to the Western genre. In Hollywood, there has also been a long tradition of films in which pets and domestic animals are meant to pave the way for teaching children the ethics of care, responsibility, and family values. Nonetheless, the next stage of these films often consider the stress and exploitation of both children and animal actors. Child actors who became celebrities in the golden years of the star system, like Shirley Temple, Elizabeth Taylor, Mick Rooney, and Kevin Bacon, usually performed in films with animals with a particular preference for dogs and horses. It is not coincidental that the 1939 enactment of the California Child Actors Bill, known as the Code Law, which protected child actors, was contemporary to specific laws of the UK related to the participation of animals in films, like the 1925 Performing Animals Regulation Act, which prohibited the exhibition or distribution of films in which animals may have been mistreated or treated cruelly, and the 1937 Cinematograph Films Animal Act, which were passed in response to public concern about the mistreatment of animals on film sets, particularly in westerns. In the United States, although no federal or state laws particularly forbids the use of animals in film media, the 1966 Animal Welfare Act specifically regulates the participation of animals in public exhibition, and the 1973 Endangered Species Act protects endangered and threatened animal actors. However, the only regulation directly protecting animal actors is the industry-based American Humane Association, which advises on safety issues, documents all animal action, and serves as witness to the treatment and well-being of animal actors. After each animal scene in motion picture is reviewed and rated, if it is deemed acceptable, the association grants permission to use the and disclaimer, no animals were harmed. In addition to drawing attention to the exploitation of both animals and humans in the film industry, Calcium also complies with GPL's statement arguing that we are always blind to our own incorporation into systems of power while remaining objects of use as well. In the film, Once a Victim, Rick exploits his own tragic experience as an abused child actor, co-starring with an exploited animal actor in a Western theme park called Jupiter's Claim, which may be taken as a satire on the way Asian Americans were exploited during the gold rush and were removed from their early society at the Chinese Exclusion Act. In resemblance, the Hebrew siblings Otis and Aaron, who sold their horses to gold companies, which rendered their ancestors invisible in the business, also tried to make profit of the unknown creature they found hovering over their range. Despite resenting having been neglected and abused, they have also become policy in the largest system of exploitation prevailing in show business and the film industry. Besides, Rick's theme park exhibiting ideas that Haywood's interest in exploiting what risks to be a non-animal species bring to mind ethical debates about animals for spectacles in zoos and amusement parks, as well as extreme animal tourism. Rick's park, known as Jupiter's Claim, appears to comply with theories running on its description of animal-based exhibitions and zoos as, and I'm quoting, present for alienated specimens who are forced to live in unsuitable compounds for the benefit of a crowd who have promised ecological experiences of contact with animals, but are actually given the artificial involvement of an amusement park. Hence, Rick's theme park paradoxically appears to lay its roots in a realistic 19th century ideological configuration of exhibition shows in which both humans and animals were turned into captive spectacles and animals were created for the human terms. That was, as soon as Ricky catches sight of the unknown creature prowling in the surroundings of the Haywood Ranch, he tries to tame the animal with the view to include it in a special show in his theme park, which, given the creature's predatory nature, brings to an instance of extreme animal tourism. As Jim Desmond claims, extreme animal tourism represents the most idealized form of human-animal encounter with the wild that is available for tourist consumption. It is an idyllic encounter insofar as it consists in a compelling fantasy resulting from ingrained ideological formations. So film that complies with characteristics that the chains of exploitation for power and privilege must not be widely shared, as Ricky and Haywood attempt to do, but should be radically dismantled at all forms of oppression, both in terms of animals and humans, and their own exploitation, which is prevailed to operate in similar terms. Pilsman gives evidence of two approaches to the human-animal bond, respectively involving anthropocentrism or human exceptionalism, animalism or reverse anthropomorphism and the agency attached to animals in the absence of critical animal studies. The story of the fallen body in the chimpanzee becomes illustrative of the obnoxious results derived from anthropocentrism, which also responds to Derek Ryan's denomination of approaching animals as humans. In the context of anthropocentrism, according to Claude Armstrong, the generic notion of animal has provided modernity with a term against which to define categories like humanity and culture. In its origins, as John Gardner claims, the emergence of industrial capitalism involved a separation between humanity and the natural world. The anthropocentric approach, mostly tracing classical philosophical writings from Aristotle's Politics to the Descartes' discourse or method, in which animals are mainly divided from humans in hierarchical arrangements, which are based, to use Ryan's words, on either antebellum animal life or inflating the significance of humanity. At this juncture, Peterson's concept of speciesism in his book Animal Liberation also comes to mind to refer to the practice of treating one species as morally more important than others. In Pearl's film, in the sequence prior to Goldie's misbehavior while they are shooting one of the sitcom episodes, Goldie is wearing clothes and is regarded as another family member, although other puts forward Goldie's incapacity to tell the time. Through the manifest anthropocentric approach, Goldie is not only humanized, but terribly infantilized. In the sitcom Goldie's home featured in Pearl's film, the fact that Goldie is sacrificed as a family's pet, despite being a chimpanzee, brings to mind classic films like 1951 Frederick the Coordinates film, That Time for Bonzo, in which I would say college professor Cleveland Ronald first teach ethics and morality to a chimpanzee that's taking an anthropomorphic stance and depriving the chimpanzee of its animal identity. Anthropomorphic or anthropocentric of our representations, animals are often considered a rejection of human subjectivity. Drawing on psychoanalytic theory, animals feature prominently in Freud's interpretations of dreams and phobias and studies of animal behavior, for which Lacan's writing on such formation hence animals mostly turn into substitutes for human fears and desires. So in Pearl's film, Goldie's sudden aggressiveness may be taken as Rick's own latent repressed sense of exploitation that establishing a parallelism between Goldie as an animal actor and Ricky as a child actor, both having their share of oppression in show business. Correspondingly, in Pearl's film, Goldie as a chimpanzee, traditionally considered as the quintessential animal paradigm of human resemblance, attacks his co-stars in the sitcom that bring to the fore the dangers of anthropocentrism. To reinforce the anthropomorphic dimension by the anthropocentric approaches, in Pearl's film, Goldie was precisely performed by the stunt actor and movement coach Ariel Notary, who specializes in portraying creatures and animals for the film and television industry. In relation to the human-animal bond, Ricky and Otis present diverging approaches insofar as having survived Goldie's incident. Ricky believes that he shares a similar kinship that allows him to establish a privileged bond with animals, whereas having grown up around unruly animals that he was taught to tame, Otis professes respect for his forces and never deprives them of their animal identity. Hence, in contrast with Ricky's anthropocentric approach as a horse trainer, Otis rather sides with the tenets of animalism. As Ryan claims, philosophers like Aaron Spinoza and Gottfried Leibniz challenge the Cartesian dualities of anthropocentrism, ability to think of human and animal beings in a non-hierarchical manner. Moreover, as Rhoda notes, Jeremy Bentham also contributed significantly to elevating the moral status of some animals and fueled emerging concerns about their moral status. The human-animal bond that Otis displays as a member of the youngest generation of a family of horse wranglers complies with Armstrong's theories about exchanges between human and non-human forms of agency and shifts in the emotional and affective engagements between humans and other animals. Constant also shows concern about blurring hierarchies between humans and animals that comply with most of the tenets in animalism. In contrast with anthropocentric practices, as theorist Eric Olson explains, animalism asserts that humans are also animals by virtue of reverse anthropomorphism or zoomorphism, which renders them human animals in coalescence with non-human animals. In the film, there is an explicit connection drawn among the different members of the regime of being, as juxtaposed scenes show animals eating in a documentary that Temple's host is watching on TV, while the radio brings news about the creature abducting the crowd from the theme park, and Otis, Emerald, and Angel are having dinner in a restaurant. This ironically blurring the identities between non-human and human animals when it comes to nourishment. Similarly, theories like Johnson Lewis and Thomas Watery, who refer to becoming animal, and Donna Haraway, who speaks about becoming one, suggest a recognition of the shared terminality of both humans and non-humans, which may transform ontological boundaries at sea to hierarchically divided beings. In those form, Jane Jacket arises as the embodiment of agency in animals, within the kind of anthropocentric and even animalistic approaches. Given the fact that Jane Jacket defies any categorization, Otis is the only one who is capable of identifying it as an unknown animal species, insofar as it is even initially mistaken for an extraterrestrial being, although it is eventually considered a predator, which brings the animals into focus and bestows upon them their asserted centrality. As opposed to Ricky, who gets caught trying to tame a predator, Otis refuses to deprive Jane Jacket of its own actual animal condition. I think that's an important from the film. Its real life is an animal, it's territorial, it believes it is its home, and thinking that we must take into consideration that we should never take for granted predators, breathtaking in this case, that Jane Jacket is an animal. As with the advent of critical animal studies, to use Mackenzie's words, the focus shifts from attending to what animals mean to humans to what animals mean in themselves, arguing that animals have agency beyond the design of human beings. As Ryan claims, empiricist philosophers like John Locke and David Hume already assigned animals capacities that challenge human mastery for an awareness of the limitations of human knowledge and an emphasis on the possibilities of other animals. Jane Jacket challenges assumed human knowledge about animals. In this respect, its appearance complies with Henry's theories about the nature of knowledge, the non-human dimension of animals as agents and actors, as well as active collaborators in the construction of meaning, that obliging humans to think beyond themselves. Similarly, Baker refers to the postmodern animal, considered as not so much as setting itself against meaning, but as operating independently, that's going beyond the consideration of animals as mere mirrors for human meaning, and underscoring non-human agency to transcend anthropomorphic, anthropocentric, non-centric understandings about animals. In this context, Baker argues that postmodern art creates distance from animals, producing an unsettled view of them, thus questioning cultural constructions and classifications of animals meant to make sense to humans. But the metaphorical embodiment of the postmodern animal, Jane Jacket, mostly displays a metamorphic condition as indicative of its defiance of categorization and its intrinsically changing nature. Despite being given a name thus attempting to determine its identity, it fundamentally changes its animal shape, moving from a huge manta ray and a jellyfish into a little and beautiful gigantic butterfly. In its postmodern artistic condition, Jane Jacket also presents an ancestral totemic nature. According to Levi-Strauss, totemism consists in the tradition of associating through metaphor a human group or clan with an animal. Jane Jacket becomes an embodiment of the Jungian collective unconscious, according to which the sentience of all individuals of the given species is influenced by its ancestors. Drawing on this interpretation, figurative and also literal sacrifices are offered to Jane Jacket as Ricky, adopting a messianic approach as he believes himself to be the chosen one. Thus to attract its favor by sacrificing all his horses. As a dependent artistic manifestation, Jane Jacket's shape brings to mind a huge cowboy hat, thus embodying the power structures of animal and human exploitation lying at the roots of the American myth. In a metaphorical act of cannibalism, Emerald, as an African-American woman rendered invisible in most Western films, feeds Jane Jacket with toothless Helen Burlesque in the shape of a white cowboy, thus depicting the creature unable to digest the mirror reflection of the American dream. As Otis observes the creature's movements in its habitat, he states that Jane Jacket will not eat you unless you look at it directly in the eye. Fieldstone is suffused with references to the act of looking and the symbolic trope of the gaze, which acquire significant relevance both in film studies and critical animal studies. When Emerald intends to make profit of Jane Jacket and contacts documentary director Alan Holst, he warns her by saying, "Horse girl, this dream you're chasing, the one when you end up at the top of the mountain in Licenville, it's a dream you never wake up from," thus showing that as an experienced director, Holst It's well aware that exploitation usually follows a bidirectional route involving both animals and humans. In John Parker's influential 1977 essay, Wild Animals, it is clear that the public purpose of animal-based exhibitions like zoos is to offer visitors the opportunity to encounter the look of animals. However, as Parker claims, at the most, the animal's gaze flickers and passes on. Conversely, as Nolan argues, audiences are conditioned to experience their spectatorship as a wholly manifestation of power, which creates a deceptive illusion of control. Hence, watching finds correlation with consumerism in the film and even literally with the act of consuming and eating. As a predator, Jean Jacket feels intimidated when they look directly at it, while its own mouth often acquires a spear shape that resembles a camera screen, thus blurring the difference between its eye and its mouth. Moreover, the pervasive presence of cameras and the surveillance video provide further emphasize the parallelism between looking and eating, thus establishing a connection between audiovisual consumerism and food consumption. Additionally, Rick establishes a comparison between Jean Jacket and a metaphorical big brother, stating that we are being surveilled by an alien space I call the viewers. The act of using directly the camera is figurative big brother metaphorically unleashes Bertolt's alienation of distancing effect, which brings attention to artificiality and the metatextual discourse that characterizes Pell's film, which is meant to underline the discourses of exploitation before involve animals and humans in show business. As stated in point, the main sign of applause at the sitcom set after Bobby has an active podcast, the carousel in which real forces work out in the Hebrew French, and the circuitry bank from that Ricky turns into a museum to recreate and exploit his traumatic past, bring attention to the artificial quality of the society of the spectacle. Since both animals and humans are trained to be gazed and behavior gazed from the camera eye, which may figuratively but also literally involve them. Also complicit in the game, Jean Jacket seems eager to justifies those who dare take a direct look at it, and when its attention is caught by the helium balloon couple's winking eye. Not even Jean Jacket can help solving the stuff the dreams are made of, hence also falling into the trap of the American dream. Phil's novel may be considered a contemporary exponent of eco-fiction in the same era, and it also complies with most of Lawrence School's criteria of eco-fictional narratives. It demonstrates that human history becomes entangled in natural history. The human interest is not the only legitimate interest. Human accountability to the environment is part of the film's ethical orientation, and it gives the viewer a sense of the environment as a process rather than as a constant. The advent of critical animals and this note complies with both the statements that we're witnessing a human animal attitudinal shift, exemplified by the fact that anthropocentric instrumental attitudes are diluted in favor of a more zoocentric anthropocentric stance. Besides, the characterization of Jean Jacket in the film brings to mind Baker's description of the postmodern animal, mostly characterized as operating independently of the structures of meaning. In its self-reflexive title, No, Phil's film rejects speciesist and anthropocentric approaches to animals, ignores the distinctions among all sorts of oppression, and it brings to the fore the spectacle dynamics between agency and exploitation of both animals and humans for the sake of spectacle, giving also evidence of instances of the human-animal bond and the pervasive presence of the consumer gaze at the trope of the film industry and its exploitative discourses. As Maurice Bedilka argues, now thus arises as a cautionary tale about humanity's insatiable desire for spectacle and the horrifying outcome of exploiting animals to create it. The film reminds us that animals are often the actual victims of human attempts of depriving them of their animal identity for the sake of profit and spectacle, thus underscoring, as Drake Flynn claims, the policy of the American dream and the ancients taking part in its abusive cycle since the origins of show business. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Marta, for the video that you sent us. Well, we are running a little bit late today, but I think we can, since there's no more panels later on, we can manage everything and have a little bit of time for the coffee break as well. So just for you to know, Marta will be answering questions through the YouTube live comment, well, chat. So if you have any questions, just you can ask her, and we will read them out loud later on. Do you have any questions for Sophia, for Natalia, for Marta? You can ask them in any language that's. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Oh man. Okay, I'm. Is this working?
Yeah, it's very old. No, it's okay. It's working, actually.
Okay. So I have one question and a comment. So the question is for you, Natalia.
I'm sorry, they just told me about something about work. I'll just say, I'm in the conversation.
Okay, maybe I can start with the comment. So the comment is for you, Sophia. It's just like thanks to last year I was working teaching a group of kids. I was teaching English. I have nothing to do with this topic, but the thing is that obviously with this kid I have never spoken about speciesism or anything like that before. And when this movie was released, I was pretty shocked because I wasn't interested in Marvel or not at all. And they told me about this movie and they started asking me questions that I wasn't expecting from, they were like 9. And I was shocked, thrilled in a very good way. Also, there was some of them that were really disturbed, but really sad about this. But I thought, okay, I'm sorry, but at the same time, I thought that they started to speak about the topic. They had questions, and I really enjoy that to see how a movie that it's about superheroes. And me, for example, I tend to have like this kind of thoughts about these movies that I'm not really into them, to be honest. But I actually watched it after, and I thought it was pretty cool, to be honest. So yeah, thank you for the analysis. Yeah.
Yeah, no, just to follow up on that, I think like that's the important thing. I know superhero movies are not for everyone, but when done rightly, because most of them, but I mean, I'm a Marvel fan, but I know, I'm aware of the quality. And when you have something like Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 3 come out, you don't expect that, and it's a good way of like catching new people because they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna go see a superhero movie and everything's going to be fine. And it actually caused quite an outrage in the United States because moms and dads were angry that they were showing little kids this, and it's like, you're eating a hamburger
Yeah.
while watching a movie, but this is horrible, but I mean, you're eating it, it's fine. I think like that's one of the things that we have to work on with comics is that the comics and the whole world of superheroes is showing that it's not simply fighting against the bad guy and that's it. No, there's so much more depth in it, and Guardians of the Galaxy can be an example, but also I worked, as I mentioned before, on the X-Men. It has so much potential, but you have to see it in a different light. It has to be done right. And it is a way of opening a discussion for younger audiences that, again, probably those kids would have never thought about experimentation if hadn't they not seen this movie. So it's not perfect, but it's a good way of starting, and it's more explicit again than, for example, I don't know, Finding Nemo. As adults, I think we do see what the message is, but as kids, I don't think they make that connection. But with Guardians of the Galaxy, you see it, but also it's not that vivisection is shown like in a documentary where it can be a bit too much for a viewer that maybe it's not used to or just wants to see it. So it's a good balance to start out, and hopefully it'll get more people to do this type of films. I don't know, I'm not too hopeful, but at least one person, and that's all we need. Thank you for the comment.
And also my question, I'm not really sure if you have actually mentioned it. If so, I'm sorry if I'm making you repeat, but I have like loads of information from today, and sometimes my brain is just like blurry. So you've spoken about the first Avatar movie, and I know that there are like new movies coming. I haven't watched the new one, to be honest, but I don't know if you have watched it and if you have like a kind of reflection about all these topics that you have explained on the new movie or if, I don't know.
The second part of the presentation that was a bit rushed because I spent much time again. Sorry about that again. Was about the second movie, right? So the second movie focuses more on sea animals. One thing that I did notice is that the animals that we're meant to feel more empathy for animals that kind of look like mammals. Like we have one that looks like a whale and the other one is kind of a dolphin. So like okay, no. So they tried, but maybe they had good intentions, but I feel like I'm sorry for the language, but I think they half-assed it. Yeah, so yeah, I do have some thoughts if you want to talk later. I have many thoughts, so I think I've made clear that I'm a very long rant. Yeah, so thank you, Josh.
Any more questions? Okay, wait, before that, yes, we have 2 online questions, so maybe you can read one.
Do you want to read?
Yeah, maybe one, and then,
Okay, Tamara Rojo says, I haven't seen the movie, but considering the oldness you mentioned and what you have presented about the female factor, etc., do you think the Navi women are more animalized than men in some way? Do you think they replicate patriarchal as well as species and racist dynamics?
Yes. Yeah, so a fun thing is that, as I told you, the humans call them blood monkeys because they are that creative. And the only one that kind of like, there's also an animal, a non-human animal in Pandora that is called lemur something. So it's some kind of monkey, really, some kind of monkey. And surprisingly, it kind of looks like the Navi. I wonder why that is. Yeah, so Neytiri, she's the main female character, and the hunter Tamara is referring to is the only one that is shown crawling on all her limbs. There's another one that is kind of a secondary character, has no name, appears in one scene, and surprise, surprise, is also a woman, and it also appears crawling. The men no, the men can never crawl. They are always on the 2 feet because, yeah, even alien species have the patriarchy. I'm sorry, I'm so tired. I love the movies, but good lord, they need some women behind. Yeah, so the answer is yes.
And the other question we have, I don't know who's saying YouTube. Okay, YouTube. It's for Sophia, and it says, is there a connection of women being extra older and in more connection with the natural world of animals throughout the media you have analyzed? Does it replicate an animalization or infantilization of women in science fiction within the Guardians of the Galaxy?
Okay, so thank you for the question from, but so yeah, so this is a work in progress. I just started working on this, so I haven't really analyzed everything. But from just right now, I think I'm on my mind. There seems to be, I do want to argue that at least in the last film, there's definitely more connection between women, yeah, I mean, you can say women and nature. But again, it's also technically they're not simply humans, they have mantis, which as the name shows she's kind of like a religious message. Yeah, the one with the. And she has a superpower which she's capable of kind of like controlling feelings. Like, you have to watch the movie to but it's not simply controlling them, it's a bit complicated. But yeah, you have that, and then you also have Gamora that she feels sorry for the little furry thing that I showed you. And she decides to save it, so we have this, but at the same time, Gamora does not explicitly show her emotions towards Rocket, but they do have a special bond. I hadn't noticed until I started preparing for this. I would have to go back to and watch properly the 3 movies to see how it progresses, but you see that her, Nebula, and Rocket have all been experimented on, do seem to share an empathy for each other, but again, it could be because they're women, which will happen to be, but it could also be because they have all been experimented on, so there we have a bit of contradiction, because there is also, I think his name is Adam. One, yeah. He's with Margaret Atwood. So you have Adam that he's the one that saves the little creatures, so, and his mother wanted to kill it, so there we have the opposite. We have a woman being against nature, but the son who is othered within that community because he's not what they were expecting him to be, is the one that saves him, so there's some contradictions there, and again, I think this is only 3 films. I think it would be interesting to look more into the comics where you have more space, like, there's quite a lot of volumes to look into. You can have, perhaps a different way of, reproducing the female characters and their interactions with non-human animals or with nature. But, if I could answer more or less. But yeah, I would say that there's a certain infantilization here. But again, it's a kids movie, so maybe it's on purpose. I don't know, I want to think that it's not done on purpose, but it's because James Gunn wants to show that we can be othered and that technically, if we look at it this way, the one that's human is the bad one, the one that was reluctant to actually save everyone. So I don't know, I'm not sure, I don't have a clear answer on that, I'll have to keep thinking about it, but thank you.
You too. I don't know if Koke and Sophia, you had 2 questions, if any of those for Marta? No? Maybe we can wrap it up now and you could perhaps ask the questions. Maybe better. So afterwards, around at around 4:30, maybe a little bit later, we will go to room 21 for the literatura taller. Okay. So thank you everyone for this panel.
Como el rango de volumen era como de 0 a 200 o así, como 250 no me gustaba debajo del pero
Ya, no, vale, ya.
yo esta ley